Hi everyone, my name is Cyrus and welcome back to my channel. Today we're here to talk about the conclusion of the His Dark Materials trilogy, The Amber Spyglass by Philip Pullman. If you haven't read these books yet and you're watching this video, I would strongly recommend going back and either reading this last book or reading the trilogy, because there's not much I can say about the series at this point in the series for the last book that's spoiler free. What I can say is that I think The Amber Spyglass did an incredible job of wrapping up this story, an overall really great trilogy. It did a really good job of wrapping up all those stories, so I really liked this third book, and I can really understand now why this series got so popular when it did. I think it would be an awesome series for children to read, and I'm at this point now that I'm done really excited to go through and watch the His Dark Materials series that came out 4 or 5 years ago or something like that. I'm really excited to go and watch that and see what they did and how they adapted the material, so I'm really excited about that. Okay, let's get into some spoilers. Before we jump into my overall thoughts about the book, I want to kind of talk about the predictions that I made for The Emperor's Spyglass at the end of book 2. Now, I think my predictions were overall better than my predictions were for The Subtle Knife, but still not amazing. Will did end up going after Lyra, which is a pretty obvious prediction to make, but I was really happy to find out that I was right in that many of our cast of characters from book 1 did come back for book 2 or book 3. I think that was really nice, especially that Yorick Burnison came back. I was really hoping that he would, and the fact that him and Will met almost right away was great. I loved their interactions, and their meeting in particular was really awesome. So I think that was an overall really good prediction. I'm happy that came true. I mean, technically, I also predicted that Will and Lyra would not connect or would not side with Lord Asriel, and I think that technically that is true. They never really officially sided with him, although their paths ended up kind of being similar in a lot of ways. But I think technically they never actually sided with him, which was good. I'm a bit bummed in some ways that Will did not end up killing Lord Asriel. I think that would have been really poetic in some ways, but I do think that overall it's better for Will as a character that he did not kill another person. So I think that was overall better. And Lyra did not manage to get herself captured this time. So I think that's great. Lyra did not get herself captured, even though there was a moment there when Father Gomez was going through the city that I was thinking, oh man, she's about to get kidnapped again. But she didn't, so I was wrong in that prediction. I'm happy I was wrong in that prediction, but that was another prediction that I was wrong about. Okay, getting into the actual story of The Amber Spyglass now, I thought that this book was really well paced. I thought that you were really, as you read through it, it was really well done. And you know, the second book was the shortest in the trilogy, but it felt like the longest to me. Whereas this book is actually the longest in the trilogy, and it almost felt like the shortest one, because I was just pulled through so much. I really wanted to know what was going on and what was going to happen. And I think that it really pulled you through that story, especially the last like 150-ish pages. That really pulled you through because it was so exciting. You just wanted to know what was going to happen, how the story was going to conclude itself. And so I think that the pacing for this book was really well done. It was really efficient. You got to know a lot of information, but it was really well placed in how it was done. Starting off the story, the first couple of chapters, Lyra has been kidnapped by Miss Coulter, and I really liked in the first couple of chapters, you're kind of getting to see a little bit of what Lyra is like dreaming about almost. And each chapter starts, for the first like 8 or 9 chapters, something like that, each chapter starts with a little glimpse into Lyra's dream. And I thought that was a really cool way of doing it. I really like when I see people using different kind of methods of displaying story, I guess, in books, and using that kind of beginning of the chapter to put, you know, a couple paragraphs of what's happening and cutting it off mid-sentence in some cases was really efficient, I thought, because when it would cut off, I'd be like, no, what's going to happen? And I get to the next chapter, and by that point, you know, I've kind of forgotten exactly how the last bit ended, and I had to go back, read that again, and then read the next one. And so it was a really kind of cool way of being able to flip back and forth, seeing what was going on, and kind of pulling you through what was happening with Lyra's part of the story, because for the first little bit of this book, she's kind of absent because she's in this dream world. She's being kept captive and asleep by Miss Coulter. But I really liked that aspect. I thought it was a really kind of cool and different way, something that I've not really seen done before, of displaying different aspects of story. At the start of this book, you're basically jumping right back into where you left off at the end of the second book. You're picking up with Will, and you're kind of seeing him first kind of meet Baruch and Balthamos. You're seeing him meet these two angels and kind of getting how they're kind of interacting with one another. I was really iffy on the interactions with the angels. I thought Baruch was a pretty compelling character. I liked him as a character. I thought Balthamos, though, was just annoying. I really did not like him as a character. I did appreciate at the end of the book, his kind of redemption was really satisfying. The fact that he kind of runs off from Will at some point, but ends up coming back and ultimately killing Father Gomez. I thought that was a really efficient way, and then he kind of, floats off into nothingness to be back with Baruch. I really liked his ending, despite him being a bit of an annoying character. And I think that's maybe partly because I just absolutely hated Father Gomez. And I'll get to this a little bit later in the review, but I really did not like all of the religious zealotry that was happening throughout the story. And I don't think you're supposed to like it, but I really felt that it was just so gross. I just did not like it at all. And so seeing Baruch at the end, ultimately killing Father Gomez, was really satisfying to see him get redemption. And what was nice about it too is redemption just kind of for himself. He doesn't end up telling Will that this happened. We never, Will and Lyra never find out that that's what happened, but he got that redemption for himself. So I like that aspect of his character at least. But we start off with Will and the angels, and he's trying to get his way to Lyra. Eventually, when he gets his way into Lyra's world, and he ends up meeting with Uric Bernison, I said this earlier, but I loved their interactions, and especially their first meeting. Will kind of just staring down these huge bears that weigh up to 2 tons. They're wearing these this huge armor, and ultimately then just kind of slicing through the armor, the helmet, like it's like cheese, just kind of like carving it up with the knife. It was really a really cool introduction to the two of them as characters. And then Will kind of goes off with the bears. You get to kind of see their interactions a bit more. And ultimately, Will and Uric go and save Lyra with the help of Amma, I think her name was, the village child. I thought that Amma was an interesting character. I thought that she did some cool things in terms of giving us a perspective into what's happening with Lyra and with Miss Coulter. But overall, she was a bit of a nothing character. She was there for a bit, and then when she was gone, you just kind of forgot she existed. But eventually they saved Lyra, and I really liked here, this is kind of where you get a lot of introduction into the Gallivespians, the little tiny people, and I thought they were a really cool addition to that world building aspect. I thought that the 3 that we get to interact with the most played such pivotal roles in different aspects of the story, and so I really liked their introduction here. And so eventually they rescue Lyra, jump off into another world, and now the Gallivespians are with them. And even though they start off as spies, the fact that the Lady Salmakia and Chevalier Tialis, that they end up really just being so pivotal to the whole story of Lyra and Will, and how they just have this admiration for each other, and it goes both ways. I thought it was really cool. I really liked the dragonflies that they were riding. I thought that was a really cool aspect of the world building. I just liked that whole aspect overall. And then they go into the world of the dead, which obviously the Gallivespians are against, but they need to do it. And that whole aspect of the world of the dead was a really kind of chilling section of the book. Learning what happens a bit when you die is always a little bit scary. Going into that section, and then the fact that they all have to leave their demons behind, and that Lyra is doing that, and Lyra's the only one that actually knows her demon and has an intimate relationship with Pan, and leaving him behind. It was just a heartbreaking scene to see that happen. And at this point now, 3 books into the trilogy, you just know what that relationship means to Lyra, but just in general, to any human. And just to see that get shattered in that way was really tough to watch. But then they get to the world of the dead, and then I thought that whole section was also really interesting. The harpies, all the ghosts, the fact that they meet up with Roger again, the fact that they see Lee Scoresby again. I loved that Lee was still in this book despite him actually dying. I love that we still got to see him a little bit in this book. And then we also meet with John Perry, Will's father, all those aspects of the world of the dead, and how they eventually kind of make this deal with the harpies and make a path for the dead to walk through, to then eventually go back into the world of the living and just dissolve into atoms so they can be a part of the world of the living again, was really, really nice. It really kind of felt to me like the world of the dead really felt like a bit of an indefinite purgatory, and Lyra and Will cutting this path through and allowing them a way to escape if they wanted to was just really poetic. Just really nice way of saying, death isn't the end. Once you die, if you want to, you can just go back into the world and allow your atoms to become a part of all living things. And it was just really a nice way to conclude that story and that arc of what happens when you die. And I really liked that aspect. I thought it was really, really well done. Backtracking a little bit before we get kind of the conclusion of the story, I really loved Mary as a character, Mary Malone. I think at the beginning I was kind of like, oh man, this is just a random side character. I don't care about Mary at all. I didn't really care about her at all in book 2. But then, surprisingly, she became one of my most anticipated characters in this book. Whenever we got to chapters where we were focusing on Mary's perspective, I was just so enthralled by everything. I thought she was a really great character. I thought her interactions with the Mulefa and just the Mulefa as a people, and getting to learn more about them and their culture and these intelligent beings, and just the world building behind that whole world was so interesting. The seed pod trees, the fact that they kind of move around on the seed pods, pushing with their legs, and it was so cool. I really hope that aspect is in the actual series, live action series, because if it is, I just can't imagine what that's going to look like. It's going to be so cool to see. But I loved Mary as a character, and we'll get back to her in a little bit once we kind of loop back around. But yeah, just every time she was on page, I found myself being so excited to see her. And it was something that I was not expecting at all. So I really liked her aspect as a character. And then I think the other parallel storyline to what's happening with Mary and with Lyra and Will is what's happening with Miss Coulter and with Lord Asriel. And I'll be honest that I just did not care about either of these two characters. I don't know if they just, in book one, if they made them too detestable, like all the decisions they were making was so horrible in book one, that I don't know if I'm just still holding a grudge to what happened there. But I just hated seeing what they were doing. I liked it for the sense that it was really good for the story, and things that were happening in their storyline was affecting what was going to happen with Will and Lyra, but I just did not care about them. I don't care about them as people, I guess is what it is ultimately. I did think that Miss Coulter's storyline with Lord Roke, when they're infiltrating the church and kind of going through that whole thing, that was a really cool storyline. I liked that aspect. I think that's partly because I really like Lord Roke, and again the Galavespians I think are such cool characters with their poisonous spurs and all that kind of stuff, and them trying to defuse the bomb before it actually was able to go off. That was a really cool story arc, but ultimately I didn't love those two characters in total. And even at the end of their kind of story arc, when Lord Asriel and Miss Coulter end up taking down Metatron, you know, I was happy in the sense that, okay, this was going to make Lyra's life a bit easier, but I really felt like they were trying to almost push this redemption arc on Miss Coulter and Lord Asriel, and I don't know, like I said, if I just can't forgive them for the crimes that they've done in the past, but it just did not hit for me. I was happy they were doing it, that they were protecting Lyra in some capacity, but I still, at least with Miss Coulter, I was pretty confident that she is doing this purely because she wants to protect Lyra. With Lord Asriel, that still was not clear to me. I think it was still selfish purposes, and despite Miss Coulter doing it for Lyra, I just didn't think that it was enough for me to, I don't know, accept the crime she's done in the past. But still a cool aspect of the story. I like that they took down Metatron, and that was a really cool aspect, jumping into the abyss with him. But yeah, their story was happening parallel to what was going on, and that was also affecting everything else happening. And the big final battle now that Will and Lyra are trying to navigate their way through was really cool. I liked all the aspects that were happening in the battle. The fact that the bears have joined in, the witches have joined in, there's all these different forces coming against one another. I think it's really sad that they lose Lady Salmakia and the Chevalier Tialis throughout this battle. But ultimately the fact that they all, like, they kind of pick their way through, and just while going through and trying to do this, they just stumble upon the Authority just being attacked, and they go through and kind of just nonchalantly help the Authority kind of dissolve into nothingness, not even realizing that that's what they're doing. Was a very poetic ending to this, you know, larger than life being supposedly that they just kind of help off into nothingness. It was almost a little bit anticlimactic, but also really nice at the same time that it was done that way. But so they do this and they continue through, and ultimately they end up finding Lee Scoresby and John Perry, and they're able to get back and connect with their demons, and quickly Will cuts away through to another world, jumps in with their demons, and they grab one another's demons, which is a really nice little piece because they don't know which is which, and they just grab something and jump through, and they're holding one another's demons. And they jump into the world of the Mulefa, which is really great. And I really liked also, I'll just point out before I kind of move on here, that the ending for Lee Scoresby, I thought again was just a really beautiful ending, that he lets his atoms dissolve into nothingness, and that ultimately he is reunited with his demon Hester through their atoms. It was a really nice way to reconnect that. And again, just to reinforce the importance of the fact that the dead can now go through and connect with their demons again, connect with the living world again. Now this whole last section of the book, when Lyra and Will have made it to the world of the Mulefa, they end up meeting with Mary Malone, and they're having these conversations, they're meeting all the Mulefa, was such a devastating part of the book. I mean, that was basically that last 150 pages, and man, it just broke my heart. It was so beautiful and yet so tragic at the same time. I think it was really, really beautiful how you are seeing through Mary's stories and everything, how you're seeing Lyra kind of become awakened to this different part of her. both Will and Lyra are, throughout this part of the section of the book, becoming not children anymore. They are becoming adults in this section of the book, and just seeing them fall in love and realize that they're in love was so powerful. And I think part of why it was so powerful was because it really felt earned to me. It did not feel forced. You really get to see these two connect through friendship and then really admire one another and almost like fall in to love with each other. And it was just really beautiful to get to see that whole thing happening. And then to find out that despite their immense and intense love for one another, that they were going to have to separate and go their own way because they need to try and protect Dust and the Shadow Matter. It was devastating. It was devastating. And they just continued to dangle these little things in front of us that maybe could work, that maybe we can leave at least one door open, just one door, so we can get to one another if we need to. But then, yes, you could do that, except it has to be the door to the world of the dead, because we promised that we would do that, and that's more important than you and I being together. All these little things that, oh, there's somebody who knows how to do this, and maybe you can learn how to do this too, how to travel between worlds without the knife, but it would be really difficult. Yeah, it was heartbreaking. That whole part of the book was just heartbreaking to see. And I would be lying if I said that I did not cry multiple times while reading that section of the book. It just hurt so much to see these two children, now not children, that have gone through so much, that love each other so much, and not be able to be together, and not be able to be together for a very noble reason, that they're doing this for so many other people. Oh boy, it was a tough section of the book, and ultimately they decide to meet in the Botanical Gardens, sitting on a bench once a year in both of their respective Oxfords, and so they could have some semblance of being together. At one point I thought that maybe they would take one another's demons into each other's world so they could have another piece of each other, but they couldn't do that either. And yeah, just a really beautiful yet sad ending to Will and Lyra's story. A couple other random little things before I kind of jump into my overall thoughts about the story here. There were some things that I just thought were a bit too convenient or just didn't really make too much sense to me. One was that John Perry, Will's father's ghost in the World of the Dead, just shows up right at the right time to say, you need to cut off these specific hairs from Lyra's head so that she doesn't get affected by the bomb. Felt a little bit too convenient for me for that to happen. And how did he find out about this? How did he know about this? We'll never know. So that was a little bit too convenient. I really wanted to know who could travel between worlds. We get mentioned that, oh, somebody you know can do this. We never find out who that is. I also really wanted to know why Lyra couldn't read the alethiometer anymore. It didn't really make sense to me. Maybe it's because she's now become an adult and there are different things going on in her head, but it just seemed very sudden that she couldn't read the alethiometer anymore, and I wanted to get a better understanding of why that was the case. And the other aspect of the book that I was maybe just a bit confused about was, so I mentioned that I really was not a fan of the religious zealotry that was happening in the book, and I think that's intentional. I think you're not supposed to be a fan of that aspect of the church. But what confused me about it was that, you're not, I don't think you're supposed to be a fan of it. You're not supposed to side with what that part of the church is doing. I felt like a large theme of the book was that it was not to be so reliant on religion or so focused on religion that you throw away sense or wisdom. And yet at the end of the story, it seems like Will and Lyra are supposed to go and start their own republics of heaven. And I didn't really understand how that was like the end goal for them after all of this stuff that had happened for them. And then maybe, they talk about how they need to let people know about how they can make it through the world of the dead. How if they tell the Harpies true stories and they don't lie to them, they can make it through the world of the dead and they can come out the other side and their atoms can return to the rest of the living world. And so maybe that is what the ultimate goal is. They want to share what happens after you die. I mean, as far as I can understand it, that's a big aspect of religion, is what happens after you die. Everybody wants to know and everybody's scared about that. And so being able to tell people this is what happened after you die and this is what you need to do, maybe that's what that means to start the Republic of Heaven. But that aspect of the story kind of confused me a little bit. Maybe I wasn't understanding as much as I could, or I wasn't paying attention enough. But that was an aspect of the story that was a bit confusing to me at the end, was basically what they want me to think, what Philip Pullman wants me to think about religion. And maybe that's part of it, is that there are so many things you can think, but it was a bit confusing to me as to what the goal of the story was at the end of there. Overall, I really loved The Amber Spyglass. I thought there was a really good conclusion to an overall awesome trilogy. I think that it did a really good job of closing things up in a really poetic and neat way. I think we got to see a lot of characters and their story arcs concluding, and it really did a lot of that really, really well. So I'm really, really happy with how the whole trilogy kind of played out as a whole, and I think that The Ember Spyglass did a really good job of concluding that in just a really nice and neat way. And despite there being some unanswered questions here and there, and some things that happened that were maybe just a bit too convenient, I think that overall it is an awesome, awesome story. I would give The Ember Spyglass 4 out of 5 stars. I think it was a super enjoyable read. I think it was a really great conclusion to the trilogy, and I think that ultimately it is just well worth the read. If you've not read His Dark Materials, I would really recommend reading it, especially for younger audiences. I think if I had read this book as a kid, it would have really just hit me in so many different ways than what it's hitting me now as an adult. But even as an adult, it is well worth the time to read this trilogy. It's just so well done and such a really nice and beautiful story. So thanks for coming along with me on this journey of His Dark Materials. I really like kind of going through these books, making predictions, and reading along with you. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on The Ember Spyglass or the trilogy as a whole. Share your comments with me and your thoughts in the comments down below. And until next time.